And let's turn to Belgium now. On the line with us we have Thierry Vanelslanden from the University of Antwerp. Hello, Thierry.
Hello.
Hello. What exactly are you doing in the University of Antwerp?
Well, at University of Antwerp, we do a lot of training and research, of course, among which also on rail transportation and also rail freight in particular. So we have lots of research projects running on that topic. And we also do training, like for instance, next week we host our Antwerp Rail School for the 6th time already. It's a biannual event which in 1 week brings together a lot of experts and does a lot of training of all the participants.
Okay. Well, very glad to have you here. We also have on the line with us Paul Hegge from the Belgian RailFreight Forum. Welcome, Paul.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start with you, actually, about this reduction of the track access charges. What are we talking about? What kind of reduction is it?
Well, the Belgian government has decided to reduce the track access charges by 75 cents per kilometer as of 1st of January this year until the end of June this year, and possibly an extension could be foreseen following the month of June until the end of the year, but that also depends on European legislation.
Yeah. Now,
75 cents, if you want to know a little bit what that means, it's actually about 25%, so a quarter of the existing track access charge.
Okay, so a reduction of 25%.
Yes, indeed, yes.
Okay, how do you rate this? Is this a big reduction in your opinion, or is it a small, cut?
It's not a huge reduction, I would say. In other countries, they have cut track access charges by half, or have even waived them totally, at least for last year. But it is significant, I would say, in the sense that if you compare now the track access charges with the Netherlands and Germany, we will be more or less at par with the Netherlands and Germany, at least for these 6 months. Obviously, in the Netherlands and Germany, these track access charges have been in place already quite some time, and they remain also much longer in place until, beyond the month of June at least. So, but it's a step forward, I would say. It's not what we expected, in the sense that we wanted also a waiver for last year, because then we took a very big hit. But unfortunately, due to the change of government, it was very difficult to get everybody, online on this topic.
Yeah. Now you also represent, or you're also working for Linias, a Belgian operator. How does it make you feel as a Belgian operator to see that Belgium is lagging behind its neighboring countries in terms of financial aid?
Well, it's regrettable, but like I said, the political circumstances did not allow for a quicker decision. We believe as a company, Linias, that in general aid should be done though in this way, by reducing track access charges or by giving some other kind of support, but in a transparent and open way and accessible to everybody. So in that sense, we're very much behind the policy decision that was made by the European Union to actually promote the reduction of track access charges as the ideal tool to help to support the rail freight sector.
Yeah, and can you explain in short why this support was needed?
Well, we took a big hit. On the one hand, due to COVID, we were able to prove as a sector that we really can work, without any contact. So we can really work Corona-proof, and we've proven that we could continue our service and even had, better quality than ever. On the other hand, we have to admit that, certain industries were simply closed down, and lots of volumes, particularly industrial volumes, but even intermodal volumes, are much lower than they were prior to the Corona crisis. We're talking about last year losses between 20 to 35% of volumes and turnover, and the same still goes on in 2021. We're still at an average of about 15 to 20% less. So that means in financial terms a loss of more than 85 million euros in Belgium last year for the railway undertakings, an expected loss for this year between 40 to 60 million euros. So it is a big hit, and it's a very capital intensive sector, so it's very difficult to reduce your capital in the same way. So financially speaking, it has been very hard, and it continues to be quite difficult. So all help is welcome.
Yep. Thierry, I'd like to hear your opinion on this. Do you think it's enough, what the Belgian government is doing?
Well, it's not enough, maybe in the sense that all this should fit, of course, into a wider picture of sustainability and measures in that direction. Of course, it may never be enough for participants, for operators, I imagine. On the other hand, also a pricing scheme should apply. I mean, tracks also cost money, so track usage should also be priced logically. But I think it's a step in the good direction in the sense that we know that there is not an equitable playing field in terms of pricing today between the various modes of transport. If we compare road transport to rail and to inland waterway transportation, all these modes are handled in a different way, and not maybe in the best way, especially if we look at a sustainability point of view. And now with the bigger European Green Deal plan, I think it's clear that rail also has a strong role to play in that. And I think as part of that, it's good that also these rail access charges are well considered. So as long as it's part of the bigger picture, the bigger goal of more sustainability and of achieving these Green Deal objectives, I think that's an important step that is taken now.
Yeah. Are you saying that you believe there should always be a permanent reduction of 25%, it was, I think?
Well, I didn't make any calculation now on how much exactly it should be ideally. And again, that should be part of a bigger picture where also the full fiscal system for all modes of transport should be considered. And for sure, I'm not saying that it should be free of charge. I mean, I'm not very much in favor of free of charge because it usually means that we get overconsumption, even for cases when that is not needed. So a charge should always apply. But it should be equitable and always with that long-run environmental sustainability vision in mind. And in that sense, I think, again, rail is a well-performing mode of transport, also in the freight sector. So it's important that the pricing is also suitable in that direction.
Now, there is, of course, a lot of discussion going on about the waiving of track access charges. And some people would say that it's hard for the market to return to normal if the pandemic is gone, if once you have touched these charges. What is your opinion on that?
Well, the market going to normal, that's correct. I mean, a big element or the most important element of any transport mode is the demand side, of course. Transport is always a derived activity from general economic activity. So if there is less industrial production, in this case, or less demand, there will be less need for freight transport and also for rail freight transport. So that is gradually picking up again. We notice, also Paul has mentioned that in the figures that he has given and the projections for this year. But it's also important that we keep this sector alive, so as not to lose knowledge, not to see people be drained away to other sectors, because it's very hard to build up that knowledge again. And if we want to see more rail freight being used in the future, we need those people and we need that knowledge on board. So it's important to keep those companies alive and to make sure that the knowledge is not lost in that sector.
Yeah. Okay, interesting point of view. Paul, Thierry is saying that it should never be zero. What do you think?
I think he's absolutely right. I mean, and the rail freight sector is not asking actually to waive excess charges in general. I think, one needs to pay for a service, and that's only logical, and one needs to have the market also function for that. And we really want our infrastructure managers, not only in Belgium, but in the rest of Europe, to have sufficient income in order to make sure that we have the right kind of network to run on. So that's not the issue. But like the professor said, it's really a part of a much bigger picture. If we look, for instance, at typically the situation in Belgium, the biggest threat that we have, economically speaking, is that we are living in a country that is quite congested in terms of mobility, and that also has its climate consequences. But if we look at the congestion and the projections of growth in rail, in freight in general, we're running towards a disaster. And actually the objective that we have is an overall approach. What is needed is the whole logistical and transport sector needs to come up with a common plan together with the authorities in order to make sure that the congestion in Belgium does not grow any further, and yet we are able to absorb any further growth of freight. That is really the objective, and there is where we have to meet each other between the different modes, and rail has an enormous important role to play in that, just like inland waterways. If we want to reach the objective, we need to double the volume by 2030, and inland waterways has to do the same. And actually, the trucking transport sector is also looking for that, because they have troubles working in Belgium due to the congestion and also in the neighboring countries. So they're looking for more intermodal solutions and so on. So we have to find a way on how to cooperate better together and also look at the whole pricing structure for that. But, we are working on that, and we will give you a lot more information about that by the end of June, when we will launch a compass or really an orientation note for the master plan for rail freight in Belgium, together with all the parties involved, and this includes the transport sector on the road.
Okay, and by we you mean the Belgian RailFreight Forum?
Well, it's not just the Belgian RailFreight Forum, it's actually all the stakeholders. We have all the employers associations involved, we have sector associations involved of the chemical industry, the steel industry, we have the road transport sector involved. So all the parties that have some say in rail freight are involved in this process, and it is together with them that we are going to propose a plan for our authorities to really look at in detail, both the federal government as well as the regional governments. And we're also working together with the academics on this plan.
Yeah. Now, do you think it's possible to double the volumes by 2030, or is this just something, a high goal that is being used for policy reasons?
No, it's from all of our models, it is really possible. Maybe we'll have 1 or 2 years now of delay due to Corona, but in general, the objectives are really possible. But it requires efforts from all sides. It requires efforts from RUs, what they have to do in terms of innovation, new product launches, and so on. It requires a lot of efforts from the infrastructure manager on a new way of management, new types of investments, and it requires a lot of efforts from the different authorities on how can you support either the road sector to think much more intermodal, how can you support inland waterways and trains to give the right kind of offer. So all of these elements have to come together, and if we do that, then absolutely it is possible. But will it go easy? Well, that's not what I'm saying. It will be a very big challenge for everybody, but it is effectively possible.
What do you think, Thierry? Is it possible?
Well, it's very ambitious, but like Paul indicated, it is possible. Of course, it will not come by itself. It will require efforts from policymakers, but also from the sector, both in terms of investing in physical infrastructure, in terms of regulation, pricing schemes will need to be adapted, internalizing external costs. That's going to be a big mind shift also, which is really needed. And many people are convinced, but many people also are not that willing. In the first place, also politicians, because it's of course not easy to make such a shift, but it will be needed. And again, if I look at the challenges on the one hand with respect to the climate, for instance, and on the other hand, also the plans that now the European Commission has with its Green Deal, I think it's a challenge, but it's also feasible. There is now finally the bigger picture. There is a bigger plan now, which all this is part of, and I think we have a common goal to aim for. So the more steps we all can take in this, the better for our environment, but also for ourselves and even for the economy in the longer run.
Yeah, and how do you look at the role of the government in this?
Well, I think the role of the government should be that it takes up really the public role it should take. I mean, keeping that societal objective in mind. And again, societal objective, that means people, profit, and planet, all three elements. And the government needs to safeguard that. And that means also it needs to give the right incentives to operators in freight transport, but also to people in passenger transport, to make the right choices and not to allow that people make wrong choices, which have disastrous effects on the environment, on people's well-being, etc. So the government should, in the first place, not be an operator, I would say, but should really be an authority that safeguards correct pricing, that is a good regulator, and that also stimulates and eventually funds, where needed, also the investments that are needed on that side.
Okay. Well, I think it's a topic we're going to continue talking about. I would like to thank both of you very much for joining us, and see you later. Goodbye.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.